Max Verstappen had always lived life in the fast lane, both literally and figuratively. From Monaco to Singapore, the roar of engines and the flash of cameras were part of his daily routine. But beneath the fame, trophies, and roaring crowds, Max carried something more personal, a quiet, lingering debt of gratitude to the man who had built him, his father, Jos Verstappen. Jos had been more than a father. He was coach, critic, mechanic, motivator. From Max's earliest karting days, on the dusty tracks of Genk to the sharp turns of Spa, Jos had been there. Relentless, demanding, present, at times too harsh, at others too silent, but always, always there. Now, at 27, Max stood on a patch of green lawn in Naples, Florida, keys in his hand, heart pounding in his chest. The Florida sun was warm against his back as he looked up at the house he had just purchased. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't a mansion, but it was peaceful. One story, Mediterranean style with terracotta tiles, wide porches, and a line of palm trees swaying in the coastal breeze. A home meant for slowing down, a place to breathe. He hadn't told Jos. He wanted it to be a surprise. Inside, everything was set, fully furnished in soft earth tones, with tall windows letting in the golden light. The kitchen was stocked. The TV in the den already had the F1 channel bookmarked. Max had even left a handwritten note by the fireplace. For everything you gave me, here's a place where you can finally rest. Max. 2 days later, Jos arrived at the airport, still jet-lagged from a racing event in Europe. Max picked him up in a rental SUV, no flashy sports cars this time, and kept the conversation light. Jos, always observant, raised an eyebrow when they passed the gated entrance of a quiet residential community. "What's this?" Jos asked, his Dutch accent cutting through the Florida air. "You'll see," Max replied with a grin. When they parked in the driveway, Jos got out slowly, looking at the house like it was a mirage. He was silent for a long moment. Then, in a low voice, he said, "This isn't a hotel." Max handed him the keys. "It's yours." Jos looked at him, eyes narrowing, hands tightening around the keys. For a man who had seen everything in racing, this moment seemed to stun him. "You bought me a house?" Max nodded. "I figured it was time you had something that was yours, something peaceful." Jos didn't respond immediately. He walked up the steps, opened the door, and stepped inside. For several minutes he said nothing. He moved through the room slowly, like he was walking through memories. His hand traced the edge of the kitchen counter, touched the back of the leather recliner. He stopped at the fireplace. When he read the note, he held it for a long time without speaking. Then finally he turned to Max. "This is too much. It's not even close to enough," Max replied. That night they shared dinner on the back patio, just the two of them, no race engineers, no agents, no cameras. The sunset over the small lake behind the property painted the sky, orange and pink. Jos seemed unusually quiet, but content. Max thought for a brief moment that maybe this was exactly what they both needed, a closing of a chapter, a soft landing. But what Max didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that Jos had plans of his own. Plans that would soon make the peaceful home anything but quiet. 2 weeks had passed since Jos Verstappen moved into the house Max had gifted him. To outsiders, it looked like a calm, easy transition. Jos could be seen in the mornings walking around the neighborhood, in old tennis shoes, greeting the occasional neighbor with a nod. In the afternoons, he'd sit on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the palm trees dance in the wind, like he was listening to music only he could hear. But inside the house, and inside Jos, something else was brewing. Max had flown back to Europe for media obligations and simulator sessions. Still, he checked in regularly through video calls. Each time, Jos said everything was great. "It's peaceful here," he would say with a smile. "Just what I needed." But behind that smile there was a flicker of something Max couldn't quite read, something heavy. One morning, Joss woke early, pulled an old cardboard box from the back of his bedroom closet, and placed it on the kitchen table. It was dusty, the tape yellowed with time. He opened it carefully like he was disarming a bomb. Inside were photos, notes and letters, but mostly there were regrets. He picked up an old photo of Max at age 9, standing on a cart track, holding a tiny trophy with a crooked smile. Joss had taken that photo. He remembered the day well, not because of the victory, but because of the argument they'd had in the van on the way home. "You were too slow in Sector 2, Joss had shouted that day. "You celebrated like you won Monaco. You didn't." He ran a hand down his face, sighed deeply, then stared at the photo. Later that afternoon, Joss walked out to the porch again. He watched a group of teenagers ride their bikes down the street, laughing loudly. A neighbor waved. Joss waved back half-heartedly. Suddenly, his attention shifted to the vacant lot 2 doors down. Overgrown grass, a rusting fence, an old "for sale" sign hanging sideways. And in that moment, something clicked. The next day, Joss made calls. He met with a realtor, he called a local contractor, and he didn't tell Max. It started small. Inspections, paperwork, conversations with zoning officials. But soon enough, Joss was knee-deep in blueprints and renovation plans. He spent his days driving to and from building supply stores, sketching layouts by hand on his kitchen counter, and poring over permits at night. The lot wasn't just going to be cleaned up, it was going to be transformed. But into what? He wasn't even sure at first. One night, after a long day of planning, Joss stood in the middle of the empty lot under the stars. Florida nights were warm and humid, and the street was silent. He looked up at the sky, remembering the countless nights he and Max had slept in trailers at racing circuits. Dreaming of F1, Joss clenched his fists, staring at the soil beneath his feet. He wasn't building something just for himself. He was building something for all the versions of himself that never found peace, for the father who pushed too hard, for the son who always kept going, and for the kid who never had a second chance. Back in Europe, Max noticed the video calls were getting shorter. Joss always seemed to be on his way somewhere or busy with something. The light in his father's eyes was different, focused, intense, but in a way that didn't quite match the calm neighborhood Max had imagined for him. One evening, Max called and pushed a little. "What's going on over there, Dad?" Joss shrugged. "Just keeping busy. Can't sit around all day like some old man. I thought that was the whole point of this house, so you could finally slow down." Joss gave a half-smile. "Maybe I don't want to slow down just yet." Max stared into the screen for a long second. "You're not racing again, are you?" Joss laughed. No, nothing like that. But he didn't offer more, and Max didn't press. What neither of them realized was that the neighbors had already started talking. They saw the trucks, they saw the lumber deliveries, they saw Joss walking around in boots, waving at builders, reviewing plans. To them, it was bizarre. Is that the Formula One guy's dad? What's he building? Why not just enjoy retirement? One neighbor, Susan, approached him as he unloaded tile samples from his car. "Mr. Verstappen, are you opening a business or something?" Joss smiled politely. "Not exactly. Something personal." She tilted her head. "Like a workshop." Joss paused. "More like a place for second chances." She didn't know what to make of that. Neither did the rest of the neighborhood. But rumors spread fast. Some said he was opening a karting academy. Others whispered it was going to be a luxury garage. A few speculated it might be a private rehab center. No one really knew. But everyone was watching. And across the ocean, Max had no idea that the simple gift he gave his father was becoming something far bigger than a peaceful retirement. The Florida summer grew heavier, thicker with heat and anticipation. The once-forgotten lot, 2 doors down from Jos Verstappen's new home, now pulsed with activity. Trucks came and went, cement mixers rumbled, steel beams rose into the air under. the watchful eye of a man who refused to grow old quietly. Inside the house Max had bought him, Joss sat at the dining table, surrounded by open folders, floor plans, invoices, electrical schematics, and right in the middle, a weathered photo of Max in his first cart. This wasn't just construction, this was penance. Not just for the yelling on cold mornings, the long silences after losses, the times Joss had been a coach first and a father second. He couldn't go back and rewrite the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could give it meaning. He was building a youth center. But not just any youth center. This would be a sanctuary for kids who needed a second chance. He'd call it the Paddock, a name close enough to motorsport to reflect his roots, but broad enough to mean something deeper. An open space, a beginning, a track waiting to be taken. He hadn't told Max. Not yet. Joss didn't want a headline or a press release. This wasn't about Verstappen, the father of a champion. This was about Joss, the man who had once been a talented driver with too much anger and not enough guidance. A man who saw his own flaws mirrored in his son's rise. A man trying to leave behind something better than just a fast name. One evening, while contractors wrapped up work for the day, Joss wandered through the half-finished interior of the Paddock. The scent of sawdust and fresh paint filled the air. He stepped into what would soon be the main room, a wide, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows. Here, kids would walk in lost and leave focused. There'd be an indoor kart simulator on one side, donated by an old Dutch friend. On the other side, a study area with books, tablets, and a mentorship corner. In the back, a small gym, because discipline didn't just come from speed, but strength, and maybe, just maybe, a kitchen for kids to learn how to cook for themselves. He imagined it all, standing under the exposed beams. Then his phone buzzed. Max just hesitated, then answered. "Hey, kid. Hey," Max replied, sounding relaxed. "You got a minute?" Joss smiled. "For you, always." There was a short pause, then Max asked, "So, are you going to tell me what's really going on?" Joss chuckled, but said nothing. Max continued, "I saw an article. A Dutch journalist said you bought a second lot in Florida, and that you're building something. Thought you wanted peace and quiet." Joss took a long breath. "I did. But peace doesn't mean doing nothing." "Okay. So what is it?" Joss looked around at the construction site. "It's something I should have built a long time ago." Max waited in silence. Joss finally said, "It's a center. For kids, the ones who don't get the same chances you did." Max blinked. "You're building a youth center." "Yeah," Joss replied. "Not just to teach racing, to teach focus, purpose, life." Max didn't speak for a moment. When he did, his voice was softer. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to think I was spending your gift on something selfish." Max exhaled. "Dad, that's not selfish. That's probably the best thing you've ever done." The words caught Joss off guard. For a man who had been told more often what he was doing wrong than right, hearing that from his own son was like a jolt to the chest. "You really think so?" "I know so," Max said. "You were tough on me. But if you can take that fire and turn it into something that helps other kids, that's huge." Joss rubbed his eyes. I want it to mean something." "It already does." When the call ended, Joss stood alone in the center again, but this time not feeling alone. In the weeks that followed, things moved fast. Word spread through the community. The rumors turned into curiosity, and curiosity into support. Local businesses offered supplies. Volunteers showed up to help with painting and landscaping. A retired school counselor offered to run workshops. Even Susan, the skeptical neighbor, stopped Joss one day as he carried furniture into the building. "I heard what you're doing," she said. "My nephew's been in and out of trouble. I wish something like this existed when he was younger." Joss nodded. It will now. Back in Monaco, Max couldn't get the project out of his head. He watched from afar as his father, once known for being harsh, temperamental, even broken, was slowly becoming something else entirely, a builder, a mentor, a father in the fullest sense of the word. So Max made a quiet decision of his own. He booked a flight. The house he'd bought for his dad had become the center of something bigger than he ever imagined. And if Joss was laying the foundation for a new legacy, Max wanted to be there when the doors opened. The Florida sky stretched wide and cloudless on opening day. It was a Saturday morning, and the street where Max Verstappen lived buzzed like never before. Parked cars lined the road. Folding chairs were being set up under white tents. A small crowd gathered outside the newly finished building, the paddock, its clean, modern design, standing tall on the once-abandoned lot. Joss stood in front of the building, wearing a crisp button-down shirt, khaki slacks, and a watch Max had given him after his third world title. He looked down at his hands, calloused from weeks of hands-on labor. He had been a mechanic, a racer, a father, but this was different. This felt like redemption, though he never would have called it that out loud. The sign above the glass door read the paddock, a place to grow, not just to race. Inside, the center looked alive. The karting simulator gleamed in one corner, already attracting curious eyes. The study nook was lined with shelves, some books new, some donated. In the back, a quiet gym awaited its first lessons in discipline. There was even a small kitchen, where Joss planned to invite a retired chef friend from Miami once a week to teach, but there was still one person missing. Max. Joss had spoken to him the night before. Max had said he couldn't make it, that team commitments kept him grounded. Joss had understood, at least that's what he told himself. Truthfully, he'd been disappointed. He stepped outside just as the crowd began to clap. Local officials gave short speeches. A few neighbors, those who had once gossiped in whispers, now shook his hand and thanked him. One mother approached, her son beside her. "He's been skipping school," she said softly. "His dad left last year. I didn't know what to do, but now maybe this helps." Joss crouched and looked the boy in the eyes. "What's your name?" "Tyler," the boy mumbled. "You like racing?" Joss asked. Tyler shrugged. "I don't know." "Never tried," Joss smiled. "Let's change that." Then he handed Tyler the first paddock membership card ever issued. As people began filtering inside, Joss stood off to the side, quietly watching it all unfold. That's when he heard the engine. It wasn't loud, just a smooth purr, but Joss recognized it immediately. The crowd instinctively turned toward the sound. A sleek, dark blue Aston Martin pulled up quietly at the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Max, baseball cap, sunglasses, backpack slung over one shoulder. Joss's heart skipped. He walked forward, stunned, a smile tugging at his usually stoic face. "I thought you couldn't make it," Joss said, voice caught somewhere between surprise and relief. Max pulled off his sunglasses. "I lied," Joss laughed, shaking his head. "You never used to lie. Figured it was time I paid you. Back for all the surprise training sessions at 5 a.m. They stood in silence for a second, a breeze lifting the edge of the welcome banner above them. "Come see it," Joss said finally. Inside, Joss guided Max through every room, describing each detail. The vision, the reasoning, the kids, he hoped, would walk through those doors lost and walk out stronger. When they reached the study room, Max stopped. A photo hung on the wall, one Joss had printed large and framed without telling anyone. It was of Max, age 9, in his cart, that crooked smile on his face. The same photo from the box on Joss's table weeks ago. Max stared at it for a long time. "Why? This one?" he asked. Joss crossed his arms. "Because that's the day I realized I was being too hard on you." Max turned. "You never told me that." "I didn't know how," Joss said. "Until now." The two stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the hum of conversation and laughter echoing from the front room. Max finally nodded. "You did something really good here, Dad." Joss's eyes glistened, though he blinked it away quickly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You gave me everything growing up," Max replied. "I just gave some of it back." Later that afternoon, Max joined Joss outside, where a group of kids had gathered for the very first karting demo. Joss handed the helmet to Tyler, the boy. From earlier, Max crouched beside him. "You nervous?" Tyler nodded. "You should be," Max said with a smile. "That means it matters." As Tyler rolled onto the track, the kids erupted in cheers. Parents watched from the sidelines, and Joss looked on with quiet pride, arms folded across his chest. Max leaned in. "You gonna run this place forever?" Joss looked at him. "You offering to take over?" Max laughed. "Not yet, but I'll help however I can." A reporter from a local sports blog approached them. "Mr. Verstappen." "Max, mind if I ask a question?" Max turned. "Sure. What made you buy your father a house in Florida?" Max glanced at Joss, then looked back at the reporter. "Because he spent most of his life building me," Max said. "I figured it was time he built something for himself." The reporter smiled, nodded, and stepped away. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the lot, Joss and Max stood shoulder to shoulder. No podiums, no champagne, no trophies, just a father and son, and a place that for the first time in a long time felt like home for both of them.